Everybody looks great. I'm Isaac, and they, and I work at Alder Commons, and I'm sure everyone knows this. And I'm just here to introduce Meenadchi, whose pronouns are they, them. And Meenadchi this is a little blurb that we have. And Meenadchi is a facilitator and somatic practitioner whose work centers the softness of our shadows as we continue to choose our light. Meenadchi's primary modalities are nonviolent communication, family constellation therapy, and craniosacral therapy. Meenadchi is the author of Decolonizing Non-Violent Communication, and we are so pleased to have them with us. And it feels great to have you here. And I really want to let this be organic so people can ask questions as it comes up, or put it in the chat and Kiki, or raise your hand and someone will select you. And yeah, Meenadchi, would you like to start in with a little, however you're wanting to introduce yourself?
Cool. Hi, my name is Meenadchi. My pronouns are my name or they. For folks who are driving or lying down and resting with your eyes closed, I have medium brown skin and I have short black hair and some snake earrings and a really bright pink sweatshirt that I stole from my cousin. And I am happy to be here and happy to answer questions. And I think also really excited to hear the things you all are finding or the questions that you find amongst each other, because that brings me a lot of curiosity and joy. So yeah.
We do have some questions that we received before this recording. So maybe from people in the crowd, but please feel free to interrupt me at any time if you feel like your question is better than this one. So here's one, if you would like to answer this one. Can you tell us about your journey with nonviolent communication? When did you first hear about it, etc.? When did you start to realize you wanted to write a book related to it?
This is actually a good question because it's a good story. I grew up in the Bay Area and was home from college in 2002. And my amma, so my family is from Sri Lanka. And at that time, so there was a war for our own country for self-determination. And at the time, it was a ceasefire. And my amma had heard about this woman in Berkeley who was doing a fundraiser to go back home and teach nonviolent communication. And both Amma and I were like, we don't really care what that thing is, but we have to find out who that person is. So we went, the person was Jayanti Siva, who I now call Jayanti Akka, which means big sister. So she introduced both me and my Amma to nonviolent communication. And the journey, so we were both introduced to the modality. It made a lot of sense to us. Neither of us super tapped in at that time. And then a few years later, I remember I was on a phone call with my amma, and, we would get into arguments as mother and child do. And I noticed increasingly that it felt like she was winning the arguments. Like the phone call would end and I would be really frustrated and she would seem really regulated. And I was like, whatever she's taking, I need to take twice as much because I'm going to win. So I found out she had been going to NVC practice groups. And I was like, right. So that's when I really started my deep dive into NVC. And then it was just like swimming for a while. I really, really loved it. Again, it made sense for me. I liked the regulation that I got out of it. And so I was in the conventional NVC world from 2006 to about 2011. And then I started hitting a wall. I had started thinking about becoming certified. I had started thinking about becoming a trainer. And I was like, something here doesn't fit. Something doesn't make sense. There were things I just didn't have the words for. And of course, it was all the dynamics that have to do with race and culture and aspects of like our relationality that are not purely observational. And so I left NVC spaces and I took the tools with me everywhere that I went. I was doing suicide prevention at the time and rape crisis advocacy and training volunteers to do in the community to do that work. So the empathic listening skills were really the fruits that I was carrying with me. And then in 2017, Jayanthi was facilitating at a retreat, and she said, "Will you come and assist like the training team?" And I said yes. And it was the first time I'd been in a space. It wasn't a majority BIPOC. I want to say though that it was 40% BIPOC, so Black and Brown folks, which was for me the most I'd ever seen in an NVC space. And I was like, wow. And I also discovered that I like had some things to offer. And I began to put pieces together around like what had been my experiences with gatekeeping and white supremacy culture, and also the light bulb that everybody has something to offer, like the community. We are all our own spheres and worlds of genius. And so when we're able to make that contribution to each other and for each other is the ways that we nourish each other. And so that was when I started teaching and stepping into my role as a facilitator. And so that was the end of 2017, moving into 2018. And then the fall of 2018, I was invited to do a 9-week workshop at what was then called the Women's Center for Creative Work. It's now called the Feminist Center for Creative Work. It was a beautiful, they were on Monday nights. It was a beautiful kind of session. I think it was impactful for myself and all of us in the container at that time. And then I left. There were some life things that were happening. And the program director reached out and said, "Do you want to write a book? We're thinking about starting a press." And I said, okay. I was in Sri Lanka at the time. The only time to get good internet is in the middle of the night because otherwise it just doesn't work. And so I just like typed some things into a Google Drive and sent it back to my editor. And we printed 200 copies thinking this will last us forever. And it didn't. That's how the book happened. So yeah, that was quite a long ramble. So I'll pause there.
That's great. I want to pause and see if anyone else has questions based off of anything you said.
I have a question. You mentioned your Amma, or is Amma your mother?
Yes, my Amma is my mother. Mm-hmm.
Our next question here is, what does your decolonized nonviolent communication practice look like on a daily and monthly basis?
It's a good question. I think on a daily basis, it looks like connecting with spirit and source energy. So connecting with spirit, connecting with myself. So a little bit of downtime and regulation time for me. And then I think a lot of tracking throughout the day and at this point it's a little bit fluid, so I don't pause as much, but I think there were many times in my life where I had like something on a timer where I was like pausing to check in with myself, 3 times a day, 5 times a day. And now it's kind of like just ongoing body scans for how is my body feeling? And if my body's feeling off, what need is that connected to? And if it's connected to an unmet need, what strategy can I employ that aligns with my values? And if a need is met, also, what is the strategy there that I either want to celebrate or keep doing? Yeah. And then I have other things. I have like an empathy buddy who I talk to a couple of times a month. I think those might be the more formalized things that I do. And I don't know if it's that formal, but yeah.
I really appreciate that, like the list you gave, like you do this and then that means you do this and then that, you know, like then you go to this strategy. Anyway, that was really helpful. Thank you.
We have another question about the second edition and what was missing from the first, kind of as both in one question.
So I think along the same lines, in the sense of like, I didn't ever have a plan to write the book. I also didn't have a plan to do a second edition. But we were selling so well. The press said, do you want to do a second edition? And I said, oh, because there's so many things I didn't talk about, right? Like, I think, and even after the second edition was done, I was like, oh, there's so many things I didn't talk about. So I think that's kind of just going to be the ongoing thing. So, you know, I loved the first edition. It was beautiful. It is beautiful. And it was a different iteration of me. And I sort of have some curiosity about what would the third edition look like, you know, if I were to write it again, whether it's now or 2 years from now. I don't know.
Okay, there's another question down here, and I would just want to add this to that is, do you have thoughts about a third book? Or would it just be continuing editions on the same thing, or people want more?
This is sweet.
What do you have to say?
I know what I have to say. I really like my mailing list. I like writing very much, and my mailing list is my primary outlet. I think mailing lists, I'm on a bunch of mailing lists, and some of them are hard because it's like, oh my gosh, don't email me one more thing. And I used to hate to send things out in my mailing list because I was like, people don't want to be bombarded, you know? And I do have a business coach, and she has really helped me find my voice in my mailing list and my mailers because I like writing. So that's what I use. I tell stories, and all kinds of like love letters go out in that way. I don't imagine that I will write another book or have no thoughts about it. But if you want more, that's where you can get it.
How do we have a way to get people on your mailing list?
It's on my website, and I can definitely drop the link in the chat for folks who are here today. But yeah, if you go to www.traumainformednvc.com, then you can hop on it.
Okay, great. This is another question. I'm just going to keep rolling here. Do you have any tips or advice for people who are facilitating a book club based on your book?
This is a good question because it's an opportunity for me to ask you questions. So I've never been in a book club with my book. And if you have, I would like to know what it was like. And I feel like, you know, maybe from there I might have some tips or ideas. But yeah, what is it like to be in a book club with this work?
I could speak on that. Actually, we just finished up in August. And just for me, like when I saw the title, this was something that I was like, oh, very much interested in, because my journey was kind of similar, being introduced to NVC, but I started like helping facilitate classes with men in prison. So the speed in which I was like, hold on, this isn't like many things, culturally competent, trauma informed, the talk about like actual consent, because even when you just named right now, like for your daily practice, that's very individual to you and your needs and like getting them fulfilled. And then with the consent of an empathy partner, engaging and practicing that. So like that's one of the things like for me that I know was brought up when we were in your when we were doing the book group, because I'm interested in facilitating a book group or more conversations based off of your book. it's something that is like, I agree with you, like I've taken the principles with me, but I've pretty much put like a lot of space between me and the NVC community because of like my experience and how bad it was. And so, yeah, that was one of the things, was like talking about consent, acknowledging it could be a tool of manipulation, you know, like all of those things, which did lead to other conversations, because even when othering people and all of like the stuff that's going on, I'm like, but we're still doing that, and we're going away from NVC principles. So I don't know, that was kind of like a long, like a whole lot there, but and then I did notice that for most people in the book club, they didn't have a background with NVC, or they knew very little. So then taking the time to explain to them like some of the practices and all of that, because I was on that journey too of becoming the facilitator. So I have workbooks, all of these things. The person I was learning under was very close to Marshall Rosenberg. Like he had pictures with him, all of these things. And so yeah, it was like a sped up track of trauma for me, to be honest, and then like coming away from that. But the NVC class I did, because I was trauma informed, understood culture, all of that, had the highest attendance with the male inmates. And there was also mutual respect, because there was like the people who would come in who had like not great intentions, and then they would be like, this isn't it, and this is like a legit volunteer, and we don't want to mess this up. So I see how it can build community. But even the liberal form of language policing was a whole conversation in your book club, because nobody who says like, I'm your ally, wants to admit, but you still reinforce white supremacist ways. And like, this is one of those things within the second, like, or third page of your book, that you're just like straight up a liberal form of, you know, policing. And as someone who works in nonprofit and gets that a lot, it's interesting how you can use these principles, still hold true to yourself, but then stay like, still have a negative impact in doing that. And so those were just like things I brought up, like when we were in small groups discussing it.
Thank you. What that brings to mind is like this first piece around like how to facilitate something around this, which is make it yours, because you know things that I don't know, and the communities that you serve know things that are different from the communities that I serve. And my information is informed by, you know, by me, my life experiences, the communities that I move with, which doesn't hit every intersection or nuance. And so really, really, truly take the pieces that are true for you and keep them as they are, or transform them into your own magic. Leave shit out, say that this piece actually isn't right. This piece needs to be colored or flavored a little bit differently. Like developing that practice of intuitive knowing of who you are and who you're with is a big part of the practice, I think. Yeah.
Oh, and I appreciate hearing you say that, as well as reading it in your book where you're like, make it yours. Because in the NVC structure, like it's so much of like, we stick to this, like, this is what it is, and there's no making it yours. And so that's something that was very refreshing to be able to look at and be like, hey, I can possibly facilitate a book club around this and all of these things, because it's not that structure I was expecting within the way NVC was.
I have a little bit different experience. So I came into nonviolent communication when I was getting my MSW in 2008. And it was just kind of one of the many like methods that we learned, right? So I never like truly like I actually focus more on dialectical behavior therapies. So I don't have as much of the basis other than having read the books. Now that I've said that, I was doing a book group with some people from the Unitarian Church where I live, which is about 3 hours away from Alder Commons. And turns out that 2 of the women in the group are NVC like practitioners. One we have a prison pretty close to us, and so we decided to have more of an NVC focused group while we were going through Layla Saad's book, Me and White Supremacy. And so this was a cohort of white women, and so I, brought this to their attention, and I was like, so I'm wondering, I was just like, from like our white perspective, and these ladies happened to all be like in their 50s, kind of almost that boomer mindset, if that makes sense. And so they really weren't very even familiar with decolonizing as a concept. I mean, like they kind of generally knew because they're like liberal white ladies, but so it was a really good opener for like introducing some of those ideas. Me being like the actual like least practitioner of the source material, whatever, and but like having recently gone through this, and I found it so interesting. So I come back all the time to this page 10. I think this is the first edition, actually. I don't know, but where you said, my friend Sheila once said to me, I don't trust anything that comes out of my mouth, because meaning that we've been raised under conditions of white supremacy and ableism, heterosexism, capital misogyny. So anyway, we actually spent a lot of time just talking over that concept and how we come across to people that when we're using NVC, how just based on our whiteness, what that means when we're practicing it, and what we need to be more sensitive to, and what we need to break down, I guess, and it was really interesting hearing their perspective as obviously white women who had been practicing NVC for a long time, looking at it through this lens, I guess. So, and I don't even know where to, I don't really know that I would facilitate necessarily a group that was very different than that. I just don't know where my place is. I'm currently searching out where my place is as a white person in this work. And, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I think the thought that came up was, I also don't know, but you will find it. Yeah.
In hearing that, I guess I'm feeling like there's this, like when you know you don't know something, but then there's like when you don't know something. And I think that's maybe this is where this this other question comes in is, how do you hold, this is the question, how do you hold your peers or community accountable when it comes to practicing decolonizing nonviolent communication? And I mean, I guess it feels like the same question, but in a different way. But
so I think a couple things. One is that, like, right, NVC is this like really formalized, structured modality, right? And so then people sometimes think that DNVC is like a similarly structured modality, and it's not. DNVC is speaking with authenticity. That's all it is, pure and simple. It's why you have to make it yours. It's why you have to speak from you. It's why you have to know your body, because your body, I was going to say your body is never going to lie to you. But based upon trauma histories, it is also true that your body may tell you things that are not true. And then it gets really nuanced because they may be true in the broader fabric of truth, you know? So maybe I'll rewind a little bit and say that for me, DNVC is about, number one, speaking from authenticity, and two, being engaged in collective practices, because I don't think that we find authenticity without collective work. I think that we are reflections of each other. And so if we want to find something that is true within us, we have to move alongside each other in different ways and build bridges to each other. We can't all be in relationship with each other. It's functionally not possible because we are also each other's shadow mirrors. So there are times and ways when it's just, we just don't have the capacity to hold space for each other. And in terms of, you know, how do you hold peers accountable? You know, one of the classes that I run, NVC, in the context of white supremacy, is specifically for white folks who are wanting to work on some of those things. Because I think there's a lot of rhetoric around, like, come get your people. And we forget that, like, our trauma responses come in specifically when we are dealing with our people, right? Because it's the risk always of not belonging to people who have loved us. It's why it is easier for me to talk to other adults versus my own parents, right? It's like such a different ball game. Like I have cousins and family members who are transphobic, and there's work that I can or cannot do with them just because of the stuff that it brings up that I do have the capacity to hold space for with other people's people, right? So there's a lot of, so coming back to this, all of the classes that I do are in some way, shape, or form centered around role play so that we can practice implementing the thing and then go out and do it with the people that we really want to do it with. And I would say that if you have a group of people who are already committed to wanting to do things together, then make a date with each other and say, we're going to meet every other Sunday from 5 to 7 p.m. and like practice X, Y, or Z, or, you know, and I could say so many other things also, because authenticity isn't just about words. It's about all other things that are related to returning to the earth and moving out of white supremacy culture.
that is it on our list of questions that people sent in. So this is sort of free flow form. If there's any other questions, I do have, I'll just jump in and say this. With what you're saying, there's like this thing in me that, right, when I think about like the authenticity or like trusting yourself, and like particularly with this like intuitive eating, I see there's this like colonized diet and, you know, advertising and intuitively wanting things that have been chemically altered to make you want them, and they're poison. And just as this like example, I think it's just like speaking to what you're saying. It's like, I don't know, it's a hard conversation, and particularly with something like that, where it's like, what people put in their body or they choose. And what really made me think about this was the little section about gut biome, like trusting your gut. It's like, and if you put certain foods in there, those microflora it's just weeds that take over and turn your brain against you. And it's like, America's just depressed. It's like, I'm curious what's going on in our gut. And I don't think there's really a question in there, but I just am like trying to pull something out there that feels like, how do you know what your self is? How do you know where the self is? And it's like, well, this is what I want, or this is what I feel in my body. I'm like, is that what you're feeling? Or is that years of television? Or is that addictions to foods? Or it's a very vague question, but do you care to comment?
I was going to ask if I could add something. When you were talking about the knowing yourself and your body, that goes with that collective practice. That's one of the things that when it came to role playing, and because of, like I said, the conditions I was working under, making us stick strictly to that NVC structure, it became more about knowing your body, because there had to be a trust between me, who is a representation for some of these people who are incarcerated, of the person who they were incarcerated, or like the situation. Those were the things that they wanted to play out. If it was like, I have to interact with this person because I have a child, but I'm in here because of the actions of interacting with this person. And there were moments where it got so tense, but that mutual respect was there to know that, like, I'm not that person, but also because of this conversation, where is your body right now? How are you feeling? And that's another thing that, like, the structure of NVC lacks, because even though when it says, how are you feeling, it's still putting that need on the other person to fulfill. So that feeling goes away when those feelings are yours. And so what do you need for yourself, not what needs to be fulfilled? And there was something else you said about, making it your own and all of that. And I don't think that that's said enough, because when you are learning the structure of NVC, when you're taking that path of becoming a, certified facilitator, their market to you is, this is it. If you learn this, everything's going to be okay, but you have to stick to this. And that's, like, I don't know, it's just been very enlightening for me. And I really do appreciate you writing this book, and actually would like to take classes from you, because this is like what I've been looking for, like, of how to keep the principles by staying authentic. And also, I'm in social justice, work with youth in the Portland area, all of that. And the one thing that I can say of working with people who claim to be an ally over and over, but gaslight me, like, on an everyday basis, is don't be afraid to make that mistake, because even gaslighting me is a mistake, but you got to own it. And we have to be able to talk about it in an authentic way, like trying to go back to NVC in that structure and saying, well, let's talk about it this way, or like, what was that feeling, or how was I feeling in that? You're no longer trying to build community or even connection. It completely takes that away. So.
I'm just going to invite folks to take a breath, because please. For Melissa, thank you for continuing to just name the places where deeper truth can shine, or deeper truth can and should be allowed to move through. Because I think those deeper truths that you're hitting on and talking about and searching for, like, those are the things that will actually lead to, I don't know, I imagine those are the things that will lead to real collective liberation, as opposed to some structured something or other. So thank you for naming all of those things and doing that work. Before I come to Isaac, Melissa, was there a question in there? Okay.
No, there wasn't. It was just like off of like just the observations of what people were saying, and just yeah, like I'm honestly like I'm looking into classes to take with you, because this is something I've wanted to continue the conversation on. So
Yeah, cool. So I'll say, and I'll drop a link in also. I have a weekender coming up that is BIPOC only. So that's in 2 weeks, I think. And then coming up to Isaac, I think I'll share what I was tracking or noticing, and you can tell me where it lands. But was there like a sense of, when I think specifically when you were talking about the gut and wanting to be able to move from there, but how can you tell? And like, particularly when the foods that are accessible or available have already been modified or tampered with or adjusted in some way. And it's like, I was feeling in my body like a sense of grief and like helplessness at where to even begin to find the intuition or to trust the intuition that might seem to be there. And I'm wondering if that tracks for you.
Yeah, I think that's a part of it. And I've had this conversation with other people, or maybe just I was jumping off of what Alicia was saying, where it's like, you know, I think I hear it more, or particularly with white people. It's just like, I don't know if I can trust my own brain anymore. And it's like that kind of feeling. And then I hear that, and it's like, yeah, but this isn't you. It's like years of this brainwashing. And like, there is a sadness there that's like, if you don't know what you don't know, how do you deconstruct? Or it's sort of this like blind leading the blind kind of a situation. It's like,
Yeah, can I jump in? Sorry. When you
yeah,
said blind leading the blind, I think that is a lot of what I was kind of feeling.
Can I jump in and cut this off real quick? Yeah, y'all, we're not going to use that phrase anymore. We're just going to take it, put it in the trash, say you served me well for a minute. I'm going to get some new words coming in. Because blind people are not ignorant. Blind people know how to lead themselves. They know how to get where they want to get, do what they want to do, you know. But if you want to say the ignorant leading the ignorant, or folks who don't know leading folks who don't know, that for sure feels true. Or folks who are still learning to walk, leading others who are learning to walk.
that's good.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Sorry. Yeah, I think it was, I brought up these concepts, and then I felt like, having this, I don't know, it just felt there was a disconnect talking about decolonizing and within a bunch of white women. Yeah.
So I'll say a couple of things. One, this is kind of advicey, but I'm just going to say it and then you can kind of take it, that if and whenever possible, if you are able to focus on what does feel like, if there's some aspect of intuition or truth that you can be like, oh, this is a true thing, like as much as possible to be able to then focus on that and build from that. It's kind of like a vibrational thing. If we look to doubt and fear constantly, it is going to amplify. If we look to something that we know is true and invest and reinvest in that piece, then it also will amplify. And then I think this piece around helplessness, I think it is, one of the nuances that I am uncertain of how to navigate is I do orient and move from a spirit-oriented place. I do believe there is something that's just part of my fabric. I was told growing up that we are all connected to each other, and that what I was actually told was that I am a part of everything that has ever existed, and that everything that has ever existed exists within me. And so that is something that I return to, that kind of buffers the helplessness. And I understand that that form of like thinking isn't for everyone, because people have also experienced a great deal of pain in spirit-oriented spaces. And it also just isn't accessible. Sometimes if it's like a new concept, it's like, nah, that doesn't make any sense. So again, just like finding places that nourish and give you a sense of rootedness. Like if hanging out by a tree for a couple minutes a day makes you feel less helpless, please do that. And then I think the last piece is really about, it is this piece of like building bridges, because yeah, there's like a lot of ways in which, it's like I shouldn't be teaching in every space. Like it's like I'm not the right facilitator for every space. And part of it is finding ways to transfer knowledge so that people can do the work that they want to do. And I think also, I guess, for white folks, and DEI, like, I tell people I'm not an anti-racist educator. Anti-racism is a part of my practice, but I'm not an educator on those things. But I think that part of the work is finding the Indigenous, Black, Brown folks who are here for you to build those bridges, right? And certainly, like, there's a lot of educators who there's educators who are like, nope, I don't do it. And then there's other educators who are like, yeah, actually, that is my lane. And so investing in those spaces and those educators so that you don't feel so compassless.
So it's not totally related to your current work, but I'm wondering if you have any projects lined up, future projects lined up, or if you're planning to maybe start a podcast. Because your voice is incredibly soothing, and I love hearing you speak, and I feel like I could do it for a while. So if it's something that's crossed your mind, I would encourage you to follow through.
Oh my God, Kiki, I really low key, I was hoping that you were going to ask me what my favorite pizza was. I was like, y'all, like we could just be talking about pineapple and jalapeno right now. Like, oh my goodness. Okay. No podcast plans, but if you have a podcast that you want me to be on, I'll say yes. I got a fancy mic. I'm ready. And then, yeah, so the workshops that I have coming, I'm very excited about. So the two that I have immediately are NVC in the context of white supremacy. It's a 5-week class for white folks. Really talking about, like, if we're saying nonviolence, but we live within these systems of oppression, what is it that we really mean when we say nonviolence? And it's kind of like 2 weeks of a little bit of foundation building, and then 3 weeks of flying, where folks just bring in, what are the role play? What are the real life situations where you feel like you haven't been able to do the thing that you wanted to do, and you feel like you acted in a way that was not in alignment with your values? And then we structure role plays to practice that. And then the BIPOC Weekender I have coming up is intro to DNVC, and then some work on enemy image and role plays, and then a day of family constellation work. And then I have I have a couple other things. One is I have really been like looking into like shadow work. A loved one of mine just has this really nasty inner critic And this loved one is queer and they're gender fluid. And they were like, my inner critic is nasty and she's cis and she's a TERF, which for folks who are not familiar, trans exclusionary. I'm not even going to say that they're radical feminists because they're not. They're just weird. And when my friend was talking about this, you know, my friend was like, yeah, she's a real bitch, like talking about their inner critic. And I was like, don't talk about my friend that way. Like, I will hold space for that TERF who lives inside of you, because that TERF who lives inside of you is a part of my friend. And I love my friend. And you might be saying mean things about her, but that's not okay with me. And so that has like burgeoned into this shadow workshop that I'm working on, which is probably going to be like a weekend or a day long in December, and then a 3-month container in the new year for folks who really want to go deep and dive in of like, what are all those parts of us that we sometimes try and hide or kick out or pretend that aren't there, that need just some witnessing and some love. So that's one. And then probably going to do a family constellation, train the trainer, because I love that work and it's good stuff. And then I have a couple pop-ups that I'm planning before the end of the year. What are the ones I was thinking about? I can't remember. There's one of them I can't remember. One of them was going to be about like friggin' families, because with the holidays coming, it's going to be like just a role play pop-up, get in here and like practice some of these things. And then I've low-key been thinking about NVC for Bachelor Nation, because I am a member of Bachelor Nation and I love reality TV. I think there is so much to be learned from how these people talk to each other. It's like free therapy for me. And I see myself in Kendall. Kendall would come back. Kendall would try and get with Joe. Like, it's just a lot. You know? Sometimes I see myself in Demi, like, oh my God, Demi, what are you doing? So that is in the works. Michelle's season starts next week. We're all really excited.
Oh, Zoom is so weird because I can see everyone laughing, but I can't hear any of it. But that is so great. First of all, are we best friends now? And secondly, yeah, no, thank you so much for being here and for everything that you've shared and for the work that you do. Can I just give you my credit card? Like, can I just mail it over to you, or like just take all my money, because I will be at your workshops. Thank you.
I want to ask you if you think Kenny and Mari are legit, or if they just jumped on the bandwagon with the other two as like, you don't have to do this, right? That's my real question there.
Isaac, what do you think? Also, yeah, I feel like there's a couple other people in here from Bachelor Nation.
Okay, we could just this could just relax. Yeah, it just felt not real. And it was, but maybe I could tie it back in. It was body language, and it's like Mari's grimace that like, yeah, I love you. I'm like, why are you doing that? TV, I guess. And then it's funny how they call others out. I was like, they just want the Instagram followers. It's like as a way to distance myself from that, because that's not what I'm doing. I'm like, get real.
I will say the couple I'm really rooting for are Aaron and James. That's who I'm here for.
Same. And I don't want to say I told you so to my partner, but I definitely told you so from the beginning. I was like, what is going on with James? And why is he still here? I'll stop. Also, the views that I hold do not express or, are not condoned by the views of Alder Commons. And this is all being recorded. I'm sorry, Carl and Ray.
I had one more question actually, related to like gut biomes. What's your go-to meal that makes you feel good?
Am I at home or am I not at home?
Both, both.
Yeah. Okay. If I am at home, anything with vende colombo. So basically my amma's cooking. And then if I'm not at home, Ethiopian food, because it's the closest you can get to Sri Lanka. I see. Mhm.
Can I bring it around to something that is a little bit, I don't know, I don't want to get too serious again because that was really fun. But so I am neurodivergent and I work with a lot of neurodivergent, especially teens. And I sometimes feel like that gets in the way of somatic experiencing. And I'm not sure if, almost sometimes I feel like I'm almost like forcing it because I don't know, like, because it's like another like should of like, oh, well, my practice, if I'm decolonizing my practice, I really should have a somatic sense of where my body, but it's like exceedingly difficult. And I don't know if I'm pushing or pulling or, yeah. Have you had people say that before?
I don't know if I've had anyone say it as honestly as you have. And I think it is important to hear and be heard. I am able-bodied by and large, and so that is what I teach from. And the pieces that are coming are that your body is telling you the truth, and you don't have to. It's like there's some words that I can't seem to find right now, but what I can feel in my body is an overwhelming flush of gratitude to you for saying all of those words and highlighting that truth. And I think it is important to remember that because we live in ableism, then there's a lot of neurodivergent folks who don't have consistent access to their bodies or a safe way of accessing their bodies. Because if you are on all the time to try and fit in and try and look normal and try and operate and communicate in the ways that you're supposed to, or that I was watching this fucking shows where like coaches are like telling people this is how you are supposed to behave, and I'm like, nah, bruh, just like be how you like. If that's like your thing, if that move keeps you grounded and chill, like that's the move. So I think this is the piece to remember, that like a lot of folks who are neurodivergent just are, in a similar way to many other marginalized identities, racialized identities, are also navigating the world in like some low-key trauma state, and you can't access your body from there. And so that's not an answer per se, but maybe I'll ask, how does that land?
Wow. Yeah, I don't know if I have the right words for that right now, but it's not what I expected, I guess. You know, sometimes I think a lot of times we get told, okay, well, autistic people, you know, this is how, right? And so not hearing something like that, it's amazingly validating, I guess is what I would say. I'm sorry for changing the mood.
Yeah, this has been a really nourishing, like a really rich river. Gone a lot of places. Mhm.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you, Alicia, for like just speaking. You didn't change the mood at all. I think one of my things is like who I am and like trying to still own that, because yes, I'm living in the Pacific Northwest now, but I was born and raised in Texas. So even the way I speak, the way I come off sometimes is creates so many misunderstandings. And the people who have taken the time to get to know me and allow me to be my true self can see where those misunderstandings happen, but also can't understand why people don't take more time to interact with me and figure me out as a person. And because of just like my perspective on things, like in my lane is one of those people where like I'll teach because my mom's Mexican, my father's Black. I'm, you know, this combination of a person that I see where internalized racism comes into play and creates even more of a division in all of those things. And so I know some of the people that I've been in spaces with here, they do, like you'll hear them call me Melissa. Like I've started owning that more because that's who I was as a child before I entered into school and became Melissa. So before getting into the school system, I was Melissa. And my identity and everything is different than what my outward appearance looks like or what people think, you know, when they automatically see me. And so it's just like lean into that fear, like just don't be scared of it. And you'll like, it's just having that accountability partner too, the same way you have like an empathy partner to practice off of and all of those things. Like that's really what I've begun to like understand is like, it's the mistakes, it's being in spaces. And again, thank you so much for even posting the links already. I have them saved. I will be signing up for classes as well, because yeah, there's not many places I can make mistakes at, or spaces that I can make mistakes in and feel like I'm actually growing and somebody's giving me feedback that I'm like, wow, look at that. Like, and I am a spiritual person. So there's been other spaces where I've been in with BIPOC spiritual leaders and people with faith and things like that, because regardless of what it is, it's not all in alignment. There is that understanding of the trauma from being in those spaces as children. And so like just putting yourself out there. So thank you. Like I enjoyed the bachelor conversation as well, but you didn't change the mood. And I just want to say that, like, yeah.
Well, we're at 8 o'clock and I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you all for having me. I've had a really good time.